From an ecosystem perspective, the energy available to an ecosystem is essentially infinite because the energy comes from the sun. All of the energy in an ecosystem comes from the sun and it's harnessed by the producers. So producers are the plants and other organisms that are able to photosynthesize and convert that energy from the sun into food for the rest of the ecosystem, glucose, etc., that then gets passed on through the ecosystem through each of the feeding levels. So we can start by saying we've got our producers that harness the energy from the sun, then pass the energy on to our first order consumers. So consumers obviously consume. They can't create their own food, so they need to consume other organisms to get their energy. So first order consumers consume producers, and then we've got our second order consumers, etc., as we go along. But there is a limit to the number of levels that we can have, and I'm going to explain that. So you often have, say, third, maybe fourth order consumers, but rarely do we have more than that. So just before I do, there's one more term that you might not have heard of before. In fact, I'm pretty sure you haven't. We talk about the levels of an ecosystem, the levels of a food chain, if you like, as trophic levels. And that means the same as feeding levels. So our producers are the first trophic level, our first order consumers are the second trophic level, and on we go from there. So the trophic levels are the same as the feeding levels, levels in an ecosystem. So one way we can express these trophic levels is in a pyramid, a biomass pyramid or an energy pyramid. So at the bottom we can represent the energy or the energy available for the producers. So this is our first trophic level, which are our producers. Now, not all of the energy that's contained within the producers gets transferred to the next feeding level. In fact, only a very small amount, about 10% of all of the energy within the producers get passed on to that next level. So that means that 90% of the energy is lost. It's wasted, and only 10% of it goes into making grasshoppers or whatever that next level is. And then again, stepping up again, 90% is lost, and only 10% of it goes into the next trophic level. And then again, 10% again. So we're losing energy every step in the process, which explains why we have less, there's a limit to the number of trophic levels, and also explains why there's less predators than there are prey, because energy is lost every step of the process. So to summarize, only 10%, approximately 10% of the energy from one trophic level is transferred to the next level. The rest is lost to the environment. The energy is lost. So why is it lost? Well, let's think about the food that we eat. Not all of that food goes into making us heavier. Most of it, nearly all of that food, is actually used by us to fuel our metabolic processes, to fuel our movement, to keep us warm. So all of that energy is ultimately wasted to the environment. Take home message, energy in an ecosystem is essentially infinite because it's fueled by the sun. So it's essentially infinite. Now, we can't say the same thing though for matter in an ecosystem. Matter in ecosystem is the atoms and the molecules that actually make up the organisms in an ecosystem. So we're not talking about energy now, we're talking about matter. Now, matter is in fact finite. There's a finite amount of matter on Earth, and so it must be recycled. Energy is lost, matter is recycled. Energy is lost, matter is recycled. So, and it recycles between living and non-living parts of the ecosystem. So the non-living things are, imagine things like the dirt, and the living things, of course, like the plants and the animals, etc. So going from non-living to living, that's the process of photosynthesis. So plants and other photosynthetic organisms take in inorganic things from the environment, carbon dioxide and water, take those in from the environment and convert them into living things. So the glucose and that forms and fuels living things. As well as that, they also take up mineral elements like nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus from the soil, and that then makes the other parts of us, like proteins and amino acids and things. So all of that is made by the producers, and it's then held in the living things of the ecosystem until they die. When those organisms die, it's really important for that matter to be recycled back into the ground, to be then taken up by other organisms. It's the circle of life. So to be able to break down those organic living things, or used to be living, back into the environment, we have decomposers. Decomposers are things like worms and bacteria, and they break down things that used to be living, releasing the nutrients back into the soil for the next cycle. The decomposers take the remaining energy out of those things that used to be living, and the rest of that energy goes off into the environment as waste, but the nutrients get recycled, and it's the circle of life.